What better option than having 2 glasses of wine and pretending you're a YouTuber to do with your little night out by yourself? I don't know, but that's what I'm doing. This video is inspired by a conversation that I've been having in my own head, and having the courage to also speak it out loud in conversations with my girlfriends and women that are in a similar stage of life where there is a inner monologue and inner process of, do I want children and do I not want children? Which is so funny because I think back to this time last year, I was so clear that I wanted to be a mother. And I was so clear even a month or two ago that I really wanted to embark on the journey of motherhood. Not right away, but at some point in my life. And it's actually been dictating a lot of my business decisions of the way that I'm setting up my business model so I can have a more spacious present life with my future babies. Now, I think that the moves that I'm making are going to be beneficial overall. I don't think that takes me from the actions that I'm taking currently in my business to give me more of that spaciousness. But lately, I've really been having an honest dialect with myself of acknowledging that I don't actually know if I want to be a mom. And it makes me emotional because I'm not scared necessarily of this inner process, and I'm not scared of the choice that I come to in this realization. But there is a fear of the impact of how that might affect my life. More so in the sense of my partnership. And I, a few weeks ago, had this conversation with my partner, who we're planning on getting engaged next year. We're planning on getting married in 2028. And I came to this realization of my own inner process, and I came to him and I was like, I really need to talk to you. And I remember just feeling so much emotion. It was actually going to make me cry. I told him, and I was like, I know that you see a future with us, and I know that you're more of the desire of wanting kids, and I feel like I need you to know that isn't actually what feels most true for me at this present moment. Like when we first met, I was very, I want children, and I think that there was an attractiveness about that to him, not just because I wanted children. He saw me as a person, but like fit the vision of what he wanted also in life. And I came up to him and I was crying because I was like, I don't know if I want that anymore. And I love you so much that I need you to know that through you feeling into us getting engaged and potentially married. And we had this conversation, and it kind of came to a point of, we just don't know, right? I could just change my mind, and he's not going to try to change my mind. We also had conversations around him choosing me, of wanting to marry me over wanting to have kids. But also, he might change his mind. And it's entering that space of, oh yeah, there could be a potential split. And I don't know what that looks like. Right? There's a surrendering process. And yeah, it's like bringing up emotion because I feel like this process is really not talked about. And it's such an intimate one because I feel like often I'm surrounded in circles where motherhood is just the kind of acceptable path. And part of my reason of kind of being questioning motherhood for me right now is I don't feel like I have any examples of motherhood that has made me want to be a mother. it sounds so horrible to say, but I've had lots of people in either my online relationships or in person where I'm like, okay, this is good birth control for me. I don't want that. I don't want that level of sacrifice for my life. And you can say I might change my mind, and I'm open to that. But I think also something I'm open to is, and what I told my partner is, maybe I thought I was going to be ready in the next 3 to 4 years, and I'm seeing that as, oh no, I need way more time. And also sitting with that of, is it that I don't want kids, or is it that I need more time? And being in that process. And I find that I'm also really grateful because there is this power of choice. And I really am grateful for feminism because I feel like also just a level of having my own self-concept, because I see so many women that have come from my hometown, that they stay in the hometown, they get married to someone adjacent to the high school that we like, yada, yada, yada. And they have kids, and they have, not in a bad way, but small careers. And I think something that I've really been sitting with is I want a big fucking life. And I'm actually not willing to put my life on hold for motherhood at this point in time. And I don't think actually in the next few years either. I feel like I'm in this really interesting space of exploring this for myself. And I find I'm going through this threshold of this process that feels really emotional and vulnerable to be in, especially as I'm maturing and also falling deeper in love with my partner, and us taking the next steps to get engaged, get married, and also like honoring his decision of what he really wants, and coming to some maybe acceptance that maybe ultimately, as much as we love each other, love is not enough to hold a relationship together. Not saying we're going to break up, but I'm just saying that there might be a reality if this comes to a head where the desire to have children, and I'm not wanting that at all, or maybe potentially in that timeline, that doesn't make him a bad person, and it also doesn't make me. And yeah, that feels really fucking vulnerable to sit with, and to be in choice of self-sovereignty, even if it meant losing someone that I'm so in love with. Because I wouldn't choose his decision or what he desires over my own desires. And ultimately, it's this really beautiful paradox of, wow, I've done a lot of fucking work on myself, because the old me would have people pleased, and she would have done what her partner wanted to do in order to not be abandoned. And yet here I am, and I'm like, yeah, that might potentially happen in the future. And it's not abandonment. That's what it brings up as an old wound. But it's really sovereignty and this really beautiful expression of people having their own choice. And so I always go back to this, is like, love isn't enough in a partnership. There does need to be mutual desire. There does need to be mutual values or shared vision, respect, all of the things. And going back to the point of motherhood, I read a Substack essay recently that really got me thinking about how, and this was just thinking, I don't agree with the full statement, but that women often choose motherhood as a way to abandon the hard things that are happening in their career, in their business. And I agree with that to an extent, because I often have seen women do that and then they default into motherhood. But I've also seen lots of women really thrive in not having a business anymore. So I think two things can be true. But ultimately, I have been reflecting just on like, what are the things that I would need ultimately to become a mother? If I did want to become a mom, what are my non-negotiables? And I was like, maybe I'm a little high maintenance, but there are things where I'm like, I just wouldn't have a child outside of these circumstances. And I think that this is something that I think actually needs to be more talked about for young women or anyone that's wanting to be a mom. It's a beautiful initiation of womanhood, but that's not an initiation every woman desires or needs to cross in order to experience the fullness of how she desires to live her life as a woman. And for me, when I think about becoming a mom, it's like, I would want a lot of support. I'm not doing this alone. I've told my partner some things would need to change around his work schedule. Or I would want, like, just for context, my partner and I are very financially, we've worked really hard, but we're in a very privileged place with our finances. So for me, I'm like, yeah, I'm not abandoning my career. There would be a maternity leave, but that an option of just being the primary caretaker for my child is not an option for me. It would either be like where our families would be helping out a lot. There would be some sort of other, like a doula or a nanny to help out, like someone to help with meals. Because I think something that is often not talked about is that the domestic labor that women carry is exponentially more. And that's just something that I am not desiring to take on. Just flat out no. I am not interested in having, that doesn't feel fulfilling to me. Like when I think about having a kid, and they're like, oh, it's so fulfilling to have a child. I'm like, I don't see the work. I don't see it worth it at this point in my life. I'm like, and I love kids. The problem is not that I don't love kids. I love children, but I like them in doses. And I don't want to sacrifice that much. And when I look at the miracle of life and I'm like, I don't know. Maybe not for me. I don't want to deal with screaming toddlers. I don't want to deal with sleepless nights. I don't want to have to deal with school calendars. And no, I'm also not homeschooled. There's so many things. And also the domestic labor that sometimes comes with being a mother. Pick up, drop off, having dinner ready at a certain time. There's just there's more, I think, domestic labor and emotional labor that women have to hold. I think even if you have a great husband, that is just intrinsically sometimes what happens. So these are just thoughts that I've been having is like, what would I need for the level of support in order for me to have a child? Because I'm not willing to sacrifice certain things. And being okay with that. And also that doesn't make me less of a woman. And it's also not, ambition is ruining women. None of this wellness, right-wing fucking propaganda. Because I think what I come back to is like, liberation is always about choice and the right to choose of walking that threshold into motherhood or not. And like I said, I'm actually not fully set on one way or the other, but I am leaning more towards, I don't think it's worth it to have children at this point in my life. And I mean that obviously in the very present tense, but I also mean that in the sense of the next couple years too. And allowing that to be okay. And allowing it to be a process.